But I'll make it brief. The honorable mention of mine is Window in the Ground by Steve Stredd, obviously, because I don't feel it was long enough to warrant the place on this list. But, obviously, just from anyone who hasn't read it, who would hear us talk about it on here, I feel like, there's enough that he put in it that for people to talk about it, it would make other people want to talk about it. It has that, water cooler feel to it. Window in the Ground does, I feel. So here's my number 10, Treehouse in the Hood by Mike Nelson. There's no supernatural, there's no extreme violence. Very salt of the earth, old Vietnam veteran in a primarily black, Hispanic neighborhood who there's constantly crime, and violence on the street where he lives. He doesn't know any of his neighbors. And he really resents, the whole situation, but he's too old to get out of it and move somewhere else. He built this house, he's his wife died in it. And, okay, so Gregor had to go for the night. So I guess we'll see him next week, but, all right, I bid you adieu, Gregor. And, Treehouse in the Hood. Yeah. The guy, finally decides when something happens to somebody shoots up his front yard, like the door and windows. And I don't even think they had the right house. But at that point, he comes out and he shouts, "All right, if you fuckers want a war, you got it." And he decides he's going to spend what little time he has left, going to war with the neighborhood, and he's buying a gun and stockades of ammunition. And then something happens, and he has a heart attack. And in the hospital, a woman in the neighborhood, comes to visit him with her child, and she says, "I'm sorry to hear of your heart attack and everything." And from then, when he gets out and comes home, house insurance covers it and everything, and he starts getting renovations done and everything. And there's still trouble in the neighborhood. The police are getting called out every day. Literally, every chapter, there's at least 2 or 3 police calls in this neighborhood. But he's able to describe it in a different way every time, to where it doesn't really get tedious, other than from the character's point of view. As time goes on, this guy decides, hey, you know what? There are these people aren't so bad, and he wants to do things for the children in the neighborhood who have nothing to do but watch their keepers, the adults, get into all this, irresponsible bullshit. And so, drug running and drive-bys and, face-offs, all kinds of stuff. So he builds this treehouse. Everybody still hear me? Everybody there?
Yep.
Okay. And he builds this treehouse, and he even equips it with a police siren that he bought offline. And so they can, they can use it all day and night if they want to, but to only use the police siren, he tells them when there's danger. From there, it spirals out. There's these corrupt cops that, the main character has interactions with, that he's suspicious of, and even an FBI agent is kind of counseling him on how to deal with that situation, amongst all the crime with the going on in the neighborhood regularly anyway. There's a lot of deputy intrigue. There's a lot of procedural intrigue between all the departments, bureaucratic red tape. We can't do this because we can't do anything except call this in if you want to file a police report, etc. But the point is that he becomes almost like a caretaker for all the kids in the neighborhood, and the parents really appreciate it. And so it was a really lighthearted read, and the guy's 89, so it's amazing that he had enough energy to do what he does in this book anyway. But yeah, this one surprised me. Like I said, there's nothing weird, surreal, supernatural about it. It's a real salt of the earth, feet on the ground story. But I would recommend it. And I bought this thinking that it was the Mike Nelson from Mystery Science Theater, but
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
that's
about.
Mike Nelson. So he wrote Death Rat, which I haven't read yet, but this is a different Mike Nelson. Yeah, it's good shit.
Ooh.
The number 9, Karnov, Phantom Clad Rider of the Cosmic Ice. I talked to 2 of the 3 authors of this one a few months ago. You remember Ben, right?
Yeah.
This Karnov guy has a really awesome superpower, and it's in this almost like medieval / Hyperborean time, like Conan and whatnot.
Cool. Yeah, it looks. That's what I was thinking. It looks great.
And the Cosmic Ice is this superpower that gives him an edge over supernatural, opponents, mainly vampires and witches. And he actually gets counsel from the beheaded, the head of a witch that was beheaded at one point, and she helps him attain the Cosmic Ice ability. He also befriends a vampire who hates his own kind at one point, and the guy drains the blood of an elk and then uses him as like a red-eyed, glowing red-eyed steed to fly beside Karnov as he's traveling to meet his vampiric opponents. Really wicked, like old school, but like heavy metal album cover type feel to this one. I genuinely just was rocking with it the whole way. And one of these guys is in a metal band. I think it's Byron Roberts. He's in a heavy metal band called Balsagoth, which
is that like black metal?
Yeah. And he's Balsagoth is a Lovecraftian god, one of the lesser known ones. So he had a metal band, based around that name. And the other 2 guys wrote it with Byron's overall oversight. He kind of mapped out everything, and they carried it out, I guess, the on a minutia level, Number 8, First Book of Beaver. Vast climate change basically ruins the world, and this child whose parents die prematurely, before they're able to raise him to even, adolescence. He's left alone, and this family of beavers basically take him into their dam and raise him. There's a huge communication gap, but oddly enough, they're able to, suss out, their relationship, what the human infant needs. That they bring him like food wrappers, and eventually he's able to learn to read by that. And eventually he acquires magazines as he reaches adulthood and is able to look back at what went wrong with the world. And as far as he knows, he's the only human left, and he's never met another human. All he knows is what is from the beavers that raised him. And it's such a beautiful book because of that, because I've always believed that animals have a soul. There is a religious doctrine that says they don't. I show some of my cats every week, and they're so expressive that I think that, they would be able to fool the most religious person, that she does in fact have a soul. I do believe that they're alive. How can they not have a soul? I'm religious, so I can't reconcile this with the idea that animals are not, as sentient as us humans. But whatever, the beavers. At one point, when the guy starts to set sail, he learns how to, operate a boat, and he sets sail, and the beavers follow him all the way, into saltwater territory, where it's not exactly good for beavers, because beavers are freshwater creatures, right? Is that correct? Because I may have it backwards. Yeah. Beavers are freshwater, so they follow him even as he's going into saltwater levels. He just wants to see what's out there, because he doesn't know. All he has is what he reads in long since irrelevant literature and magazines, But this is really the heart of the book for me, is that he learns this system to talk with beavers by patting the water, right, in a rhythmic, percussive way. He pats at them the 3 percussion signal that says, go back or stop, but they keep going. They keep following alongside him, swimming beside him on the boat. And oh my God, I'm about to tear up even thinking about it. It was so beautiful. It was so beautiful. They would not go back, and it's like it almost puts them on a humanistic level because of their loyalty to him. He became their tribal leader when he rose to adulthood because he learned to do things that beavers can't do. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This book, man, I can't recommend it enough. Gregor made fun of me for because I got several episodes straight. I wouldn't shut up about it. But I mean, that scene is the heart of this book. And I speak to Ray Stasko, the author, occasionally. He's not in good health at all. But I think this guy actually had a mainstream publishing deal at one point with Animal City back in the 80s, I think, and he turned it all down so he could write the stuff he wants, like the Beaver, Percy in Paradise, John, Space Baby in the Bastard Universe, stuff like this. These are all things that the mainstream publishing world would have rejected at the time, and probably still would today. But at least he's writing what he wanted to write, exactly how he wanted to write it. And so this is one of my favorite authors, and I pray for some sort of recovery for him. But I think his writing days are behind him, based on what he told me, so in confidence. So. Here's another one Gregor gave me shit about because I wouldn't shut up about it for so long. But this is the best vampire series I've ever read. There's one more below it called the Knuckleball series or Knuckle Supper series with like these weird dope smoking vampires. But this one is king for me as far as good vampire literature. Post Twilight and post Sookie Stackhouse world,
Okay.
Church Mouse is one book, and then this is Church Mouse book 2, The Change, where the main character, and I'm sorry, but I have to spoil this to justify book 2. She asks them to bite her and make her one of them. But see, the way that R.H. Hale describes the transformation process, it almost sounds like it almost sounds like getting cancer, the torture that this character, Rona, goes through in order to become a vampire. And I mean, so that by the time that she's done transforming and they bring her like blood in a little, baby bottle, basically, unless I read it wrong. And, she almost dies several times for all number of reasons. But, when she finally does, start to adapt to becoming a vampire, and keep in mind, these all live underground underneath a cathedral in like this like suburban world that used to be a city. You know how some cities have become underground for one reason or another due to erosion or, extra architecture built on top to prevent dust storms,
Yeah.
Everybody knows what I'm talking about, right? So this is eventually it became an underground city, and the cathedral was built on top of it. And the vampires have got this bishop wrapped around their finger because he's like hooked on heroin, and he's a real bastard because he tries to have Rona killed by turning the vampires against her several times, but it always ends up with him embarrassing him. There's a lot of character intrigue with other vampire clans, but not in a hackneyed way like with Vampire Diaries or True Blood or Twilight. I mean, it feels like how vampires would really be if they were real, and had to hide. And it even reminded me of Lost Boys when they take Rona out on her first hunt where she actually kills someone and they don't have to, extract the blood for her. I get a very Lost Boys feel from how fast it happens. I mean, we've all seen Lost Boys, right?
Wait, what was Lost Boys again?
It was a vampire. It was a classic vampire movie, man. Come on.
Stephen King, I think, actually, too.
No, Stephen King didn't write Lost Boys. Whitley Strieber wrote a novel called Lost Boys, but I'm talking about the movie.
Oh, I'm thinking of the others. I'm thinking of the other vampire story. That's right. Sorry.
Kiefer Sutherland. Well, anyway, this book is the real deal, man. But definitely start with Church Mouse Volume 1. if you're going to take up this series. But this is the superior book to me. There's a lot of cries that a series only gets worse with each passing book. This is way better than the first book. I'll stand by that. And there's a tease of lycanthropes introduced near the end. So we're going to have werewolves introduced eventually in volume 3, I'm hoping. Really kick-ass. Best vampire series I've ever read. Gregor talked about this one, and I'm in agreement that this one is just off the charts imaginative. So there's this place called the Submundo in some tropical just in South America. It's called the Submundo, and it's a territory where, oddly enough, people develop amnesia the longer they stay. And so, they could kill someone and not know it, because you're so freed from inhibitions due to these there's nearly mythical creatures that are actually real biological, animals in this space. They only live in the Submundo, and they're called duendes. And they build these strange little pyramids out of sand that people will destroy out of superstition. You never really get the sense whether the duendes are benevolent or malevolent, but the villagers who have to live, with them outside of their territory, they believe them to have very nefarious intentions. This British police officer is called in to investigate, do a wellness check on these beings called the duendes, and even he cannot, control this amnesia, this ever-encroaching amnesia. He tries to keep a journal to document his days, but still he eventually just stops using it altogether as he explores its territory and is in like a vast euphoria, and forgets all about it. And it just has that effect on human beings no matter what, I guess, except for the natives maybe. So yeah, we're dealing with a really grade A imagination here with this book. And Gregor had this one on his list as well. And Gregor also had Ghosters by Ralph Robert Moore on his list. And that is my next one. Hang on. Let me pull up the actual one.
Try typing in Ralph Robert Moore.
Here it is. So yeah, this is another one Gregor had on his list. We're in solid agreement on. Like, if I describe this as like being like Ghostbusters, it really detracts from what it's about, because these are much like church mouses. I feel how vampires would really be. This is how I feel actual Ghostbusters would actually be, but they're more like ghost hunters who are able to diagnose hauntings. Does that make sense?
Yeah. You've
got your flesh ghosts who don't know they're dead. You've got your sentimental ghosts. At one point, this insanely tall, like 6'11", 7 foot tall ghoster woman goes out to this guy's house, which dates back to the 18th century, where they've continuously built houses and connected one house to another. And so it's almost like a house centipede going all the way back in and through the swamp land. And she's trying to help this male widow locate his wife's ghost. And they go through several of the houses. I mean, it would take weeks to go through every house. Some of them he's never even been in. It's really weird concept in one of the short stories here. That's just an example, and I think he finds his wife's ghost in a milk carton of all places. Probably my favorite story in this collection, and they're all related to ghosters, and sometimes they will cross paths in different stories. My favorite one, I think, though, is the one with the guy who collects ghosts in these little jars, and they end up looking like pickled pig's feet, or like specimens in a science lab in formaldehyde. Those look. And he collects ghosts in that, and he's actually got one that was one of the presidents before the Constitution was signed. The pre-constitutional American presidents. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. He claims to have a ghost in one formaldehyde jar, of that. Another one's an Indian woman who was sent away on the lake or the Trail of Tears. And I mean, he collects them and he will sell them or buy them depending on if someone will bring them to him. He keeps them in a little barn. Really weird stories. Some of the ghosts don't know they're dead. That would be a flesh ghost. Another one hangs around and just is really inconvenient. Claims to be a cousin from out of town, and he haunts this couple to the point that I think the husband dies in a car accident trying to chase him away. I can't remember if that's how it plays out, but Ghosters is badass too. Seriously. Here's one that hasn't got. I don't know anybody else who's read this one but me. I think, Ben, you were the one that actually made me aware of this, because didn't somebody give a lecture or write an essay about this cover?
It was it was from a YouTube video about older horror books and their covers. Mm-hmm. And I think he was actually talking about the original paperback cover. I think that's the re-release.
So wait, there's another cover that they were talking about?
It's one of those, I think.
Maybe this one. Is that it? Is that the one?
I think that might be it, yeah.
That looks a lot like a Leisure or a Zebra, doesn't it?
Yeah, what's the press that put it out there?
Pan Books.
I don't know them.
Yeah, I never heard of them. I think this is set in early 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. When was the other edition published? 1990. Okay, yeah. But I thought they had cell phones in this, is what I don't understand.
Maybe really early cell phones?
Cordless,
maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's it.
Anyway, this guy is about to, get a doctorate. Is that what they do when they become doctors, right? He's in medical school, and him and his buddies accidentally run a little girl over. This has obviously consequences that will inform the plot 16 years later. There's this mute cartoonist who will draw automatically almost, these elaborate scenes from his hospital bed. He's mute, he's basically catatonic, but he will still draw when people are not watching him. And I don't really want to give too much away, because their paths are linked inextricably in a way that, if I say too much, we'll give it away. But it's not what you're thinking. There's a bit of a little bit of what territory to go through to get to that twist. But this guy has a family now, and he looks back. He's still haunted by the dreams of them deciding to bury this poor girl. It was a complete accident, but I don't know how to talk about this book without spoiling it in a way that even I could even sympathize with Zach on. So I'm just going to say the cartoonist, it's badass. That's my number 4. I really wish we could get this guy on, Bud Smith. I don't even know if he does interviews, but he probably wouldn't, just for my reputation with his peers, But Tollbooth is by Bud Smith. I previously had read his book F-250, which is a realistic fictional memoir almost. And he in this one, he takes a more of a fantastical route, because there's even a brief journey through the afterlife that the main character takes. And he becomes a whaler, I think, on one of those Alaskan boats, where they basically sleep in the engine room. But Jimmy is originally a toll booth attendant, and then he raises the ire of these local kids by vandalizing their clubhouse, because they did something to piss him off. I don't remember what. But this guy calls himself Kid with Clown Head, and he eventually makes a documentary about Jimmy's life and becomes famous off it. I mean, it premieres in theaters. And I mean, it's just a really weird, whimsical adventure, how you get from 2 years photographing roadkill with an eccentric French millionaire chick to, becoming an Alaskan boat whaler, to journeying through the afterlife, and then back to see you were in a documentary. Those are the what Kubrick would call the 4 non-submersible units of this story. I don't know fully what Kubrick meant when he said that. But he calls his points of his stories non-submersible units. Those would be the 4 non-submersible units of this book. So without spoiling it anymore, that's an overview of all the crazy shit this character goes through. I would recommend F-250 just as much as Toll Booth. Bud Smith he's knocking it out of the park. I know I think he has some poetry out too, but I refuse to read it just because I feel like it's a waste of his talent to do poetry. But whatever. I could not mention it. Damn, Charlie. Can everybody still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't not mention at least one Jeff Strand book, although I've read several this year. Dweller was my favorite until I read this. Blister, about this girl who was hideously burned by a boyfriend on graduation night, I think. And so she's become kind of like the town legend that people whisper about, you know? Well, one night on a dare or because they're drunk, high, and bored, this guy and his friends go to see Blister. Hey, man, you want to go see Blister? It's pretty freaky shit, man. They go to this little tiny house behind a bigger house, and they look in the window at this really burned girl, you know, and she sees and she's horrified and embarrassed that they're looking through the window and she's being treated like a freak, you know, but she's used to it. But the look on her face humbles the one main character enough that he comes back, knocks on her door and says, I'm real sorry about that. We were jerks last night, you know. And from there, they develop a friendship with consequences spiraling out in every direction, from a very overprotective father, and who could blame him, to a town secret that all the, people who were friends with the dad got in on for some vigilante justice, hint, hint. And some things that those vigilantes got wrong about the situation. Jeff Strand, I don't think I've ever read a book by him that wasn't at least passable. I wasn't a fan of the one that won awards, the Haunted Monster Tour, simply because the villain seemed too cartoonish for me. And he's better when he's like working with semi-cartoonish but semi-serious villains. I also didn't like Mandibles about the killer ants too much, but even that was still above average for Strand. One of my favorite authors, but Blister is at least on par with Dweller. If it's my number 2 anyway. And finally, number 1, drum roll. And Ben, you have this, but no rush. I'm just going to tell you. Yeah, Mules by Jared Martin. Nobody's heard of this kid. I don't even know if he has social media. I don't know if he's ever done an interview for any of his books, but he's like, to me, my best kept secret on this show. Because he also wrote You Fucked with the Wrong Motherfucker. And I had to buy that just by the audacity of the title, you know?
Yeah,
and it was kind of silly in places, but it became just capable enough that, it was on my year-end list last year. Well, this right here is Jared Martin's masterpiece. These 2 girls go on a spring break trip to Mexico, and they think that it's going to be Texas border into Mexico, and they think it's going to be this fun thing. One of the other girls backs out, and they run afoul of mules who are into drug trafficking, human trafficking, organ trafficking. They eventually get kidnapped by a cartel, and it's horrible what they go through, man. There's a gangster or someone that was in debt to the cartel. He dies, and her still, mourning daughter, his still mourning daughter is kidnapped, and they sew drugs into her body to transfer across the border. Okay. And I mean, she's still dying. She's dying. She's clearly getting infection in there and everything. But that's how much this cartel doesn't care. It's just one example. There's a nod to the final scene of 7 in this book, but that is you won't see. It'll creep up on you. if you read it. This is the best thing Jared Martin's ever read or written, and I wish more people knew about this guy. This is seriously, this is my number one. It wasn't even a question when I put them all. When I put my list together, this had to go at number one.
I'm having trouble finding him online, either on Amazon or even just.
You can't find him.
Jeremy did send me this book. That he put a new cover on
It's
Mules.
horrible. The new
It's
cover-
horrible.
I don't
It's
know what
horrible.
Yes, that the
Like
one that I'm doing. The
this
one that
old
I'm
one?
doing, that's fine. The new one, I don't. There's
It's passable. It looks like the dimensions are wrong, but it's passable for an ebook.
The new one though, what is it? It's like a cartoon strip or something.
Yeah,
Looks
no,
like a kid did it.
I found him in it. Yeah, it looks like it does look different from the original.
It's like a little kid
Yeah.
did it.
This right here. This is not a good representation of this awesome story.
It's not
This
showing on the screen.
it's not. Okay. Here. You'll wish you hadn't seen it though. Look at this. I've
Yeah,
seen
that's really
kids
bad.
draw. I've seen kids draw better than that. That's the
That's
thing.
pretty low quality.
Looks like that Empress Teresa book.
Yeah, it is
Oh my
like
God.
that. Yes.
Oh my god. the guy that's like major lolcow meme territory, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sad to say I bought that one too, just to see what the fuss was about. I haven't gotten around to it yet, but apparently it's really bad, right?
Yeah,
Empress
I've heard it's
Teresa?
pretty awful.
Have you read it? Oh,
I
man.
haven't read it. No, I've read like excerpts of it, and yeah, it's the guy is either very unwell or he's just a genuinely stupid person.
But yeah, Mules. There's no question it had to be number one, even past Jeff Strand, which is saying something because that's one of my favorite authors. But seriously, this damn book, man. Anybody who's listening to me, I don't know how anybody could not like Mules. It's that action packed and that, like, trust me. When I say that even the dog has a redemption arc, okay, we're all familiar with redemption arcs where you go from bad to good. The way that it comes together at the end, and even this dog that suffers through all these dog fights by his owner, and oddly enough, the dog owner, he still loves the dog, you know, and even though he puts him through these fights, it's just a different, harsher lifestyle, you know, in that territory. But the dog gets a redemption arc at the end. Damn. And that feels good to even be able to say that about this, man. I mean, the way that the main character, one of the girls, gets the last laugh, fucking, I was like cheering her on, like I could not believe that she was that ballsy, you know, that she got the last laugh like that. And I won't say how, but damn, I mean, yeah, seriously, if you ever read this book, why not? I mean. So Jared Martin, if this gets back to you in any way, wherever you are out there, something tells me, you know, low profile for a reason. But yeah, man, come on here so I can, you know, talk to you about this because it's seriously awesome. That's my list, mostly fiction, but there wasn't one theology book in there. Zach, speaking of Zach, I did have an announcement, and you know, this is kind of hard to make and kind of easy to make.